very much. Are there any questions? Yes?
Yes, I have a question about connection between birds and reptiles.
Yes.
We've seen the example of species that appeared in the end of the dinosaurs era, but there's a theory that says the connection, the feathers, appears in the middle of Jurassic era, between early and middle Jurassic, and the raptor-like tree. You know, the dinosaurs from raptor kind. What do you think about that theory?
How this occurred is quite controversial, actually. So we know that the earliest forms of dinosaur, bird-like things we see had filamentous feathers. But exactly when full feathers arrived and when things were able to fly is still subject to great controversy. What we do know, and I won't say that we've completely settled the issue of when, but what I will say is that what we find is dinosaurs with feathers, many of which can't fly. And that alone is enough to show you that birds evolved from things that are dinosaurs. In fact, virtually every scientist, except maybe one or two, thinks that birds are dinosaurs. And instead you see a bird in a tree, you realize that those are the only existing dinosaurs. But the details of how this happened, I not only do I not follow this, but I wouldn't be able to address your question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you think that evolution still operates on humans now? I mean, the rate of survival is incredibly high, and so you know the context obviously of the question. I would like to ask your personal opinion about the question.
So, in case you didn't hear, he asked if evolution is still occurring in humans. That's a very good question. It's actually the most common question I get when I give a public lecture. Are we still evolving? And the answer is yes, we are, in two different ways. You say that most people survive now, but that's not true in places like Africa or Asia. So the high rate of medical care and survival of childbirth is only true in first world and westernized countries. So there's a huge infant mortality and pre-menopausal mortality in other countries. And that's going to impose natural selection, and we know that. So if there is a source of mortality that kills you before you reproduce, and there is genetic variation to respond to that, for example, malaria response or resistance to dysentery, then we will evolve. We can actually see this happening in Africa because of AIDS. There is a gene that gives you resistance to developing AIDS if you have HIV, and we've watched the frequency of that gene go up over time. That's natural selection. We've also seen in the United States that there are forms of mortality that will kill you before you die, like heart disease, diabetes, obesity. And over the last 3 generations, we've watched genetically that hypertension goes down, obesity goes down, and things go down. So we are responding, but in to different things than we responded to millions of years ago. The things that kill us now are not saber-toothed tigers or other people. It's heart disease, obesity, the bad things we eat. The other thing is, so we're evolving progressively in that way, but in a way that's not so obvious because it's slow. We're also degenerating, as you mentioned, because we have medical care in some places. So probably most of you would be dead by now if there had been medical care. If you've ever taken an antibiotic or had a tooth abscess, you would probably be dead. So medical care allows the genetic basis of those traits to persist. So, but that's evolution too. It's just evolution in the wrong direction. So, because evolution is defined as genetic change in populations, and we are changing genetically for the worse in that way because we allow people to live who would have been misfits on the savannah. And so there's 2 answers to your question, but the main answer is yes, we're evolving. Some ways progressively, but undetectably, and other ways we're degenerating. I mean, look at these. I need these because my eyes are bad. I've had fillings and things like that. Yeah, but we're evolving. Some people like Steve Jones in Great Britain say that human evolution has stopped. I don't believe that at all.
Any more questions?
What is the subject of your new book? Is it about evolution or atheism?
It's not about either, actually. It's sort of more towards the latter. I mean, my book is, let me tell you a little bit personal thing, except when you teach evolution for 30 years in America, and you don't make any progress, the creationists maintain their 40% status, then you begin to think, well, what's the problem? And you quickly realize, as I did, that it's religion that's the problem. It's not ignorance, it's not failure to be exposed to the evidence, it's that religion blinkers you to evolution. And then you think a little bit harder, and you realize that there's a lot bigger problems in this world than creationism. I mean, even in Poland, you have problems with abortion, discrimination against homosexuals. This is a personal view, but I think the Catholic Church is responsible for a lot worse problems than creationists are. So what I realized, and this is the way Richard Dawkins has gone to, is that if you really want human enlightenment to come to the world, which includes accepting creation, accepting evolution, then you have to get rid of those forms of thought that are immune to rationality. And the biggest ones of those is religion. So the subject of my book is not really an attack on religion, it's more an attack on faith, which is the way that religious people believe. It's just through revelation, through authority, through dogma. And my contention in this book is, first of all, that religion and science are completely incompatible ways of looking at the world. And second of all, that that faith is a very, very bad way to approach one's life. And you should do it, not just scientifically, but not through reason, because after all, reason is a tool of science. And so what I'm going to talk about mostly is not attacking religion. Richard Dawkins has already done that in that region. I want to talk about the disparities between looking at things through reason and evidence, and then looking at them through faith. And it'll be another 2 or 3 years before you ever see this book.
Okay, and the last question, or 2 questions. Okay, and here I think that after the second question, we simply went outside. If someone wants to discuss more, we will be time there, because I know the here is little small delay in the program. So 2 questions and more discussion outside. Okay, so you are starting, sir.
Okay, it seems obvious that whenever evolutionary biologists tries to explain evolution,
Could you speak up a bit?
it seems obvious when an evolutionary biologist tries to explain evolution, the question of atheism as well as comes there. Is it possible for people, is it possible for scientists to explain evolution without bringing the idea of atheism or creation, just to deliver that to the people? Because for many, it is true that most of the evolutionary biologists are atheists, but their atheism is not from, they were told, okay, don't believe in God. It was their own decision.
From what?
It was their own decision at...
Well, it's not really from, we don't make a decision, okay, I'm going to be an atheist. What happens is, I will get to your question, but we don't make a decision that we're going to become atheists. It's just that when you do science for a living, and you keep finding stuff over and over again, and you're not only don't need to invoke a God, but you see that people that believe in God are constantly trying to impede your work. And that also in the history of science, we've never made any progress by thinking about the supernatural. Then you reject it. That's why you become an atheist. It's not that you make a decision. It's a sort of a byproduct, a professional byproduct. But anyway, your question was, let me see if I can interpret. Isn't it possible to sell evolution to people without talking about creationism and religion?
Exactly. And the thing is now, it seems like that if you are too preachy about something, people automatically forms a stronger resistance to it.
Yeah.
I'd say in
Yeah.
the case of Richard Dawkins,
Yeah.
I mean, his popularity among scientists is obviously, you cannot question it, but those who are away from science, they are kind of, when they hear the name, they are just immune to whatever he's saying, trying to twist his words.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So his question was, I'll reinterpret it, isn't it counterproductive for somebody like me to stand up here and talk about evolution and then say, well, you know, atheism is the thing we really need to have in order to get rid of creationism? And the answer is, I don't think so. Because if you try to teach evolution in the United States without mentioning creationism, your students are just going to turn off. Because they're all creationists. They all come to college. They get, I mean, even in Poland, you get religion in kindergarten, right? So you're already indoctrinated by the time you get to college, and you're immune to evolution. So from that point of view, yes, you need to mention creationism because that's the scientific background that students have. The second reason is that that you cannot teach something without a historical context. And if you're trying to teach evolutionary biology, you have to put it up against the most widespread alternative theory, which is creationism. So when I teach it, if you teach Darwin, or if you read Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, you'll see that that book is full of creationism. He'll say, well, how is this biogeography explained by the idea of a deity? Darwin makes his argument rhetorically by constantly going back and saying, well, this is creationism, this is what evolution predicts. That's sort of the history of science, and that's the way he convinced people. The other part is, I do not believe that attacking religion makes people resistant to evolution. I mean, I hear this very frequently, that, you know, if you tell people you can be religious and accept evolution, that makes them friendly to evolution. But it doesn't work that way in America. I mean, you can talk to evangelical Christians all the time and tell them, look, you can believe in evolution and have your belief in God, but in their hearts they know that they can't. You know? Because evolution gets rid of Adam and Eve, it gets rid of Genesis, it gets rid of, and if you get rid of Adam and Eve, then you get rid of Jesus. So, you know, it doesn't work. And so, I think Richard Dawkins has made more converts for evolution than any religious person ever has, even though he's a blatant atheist. So it sounds good to say, don't be so hard on religion, because you'll offend them and make them resistant to evolution. But the facts are that it doesn't seem to work that way. You need, and that's why it's a long battle that we face. We can't just do what I did, teach evolution and say, okay, race can come around. If I did this without mentioning creationism, it would have no effect whatsoever. So you have to get rid of what's preventing people from accepting evolution, and that is this view that faith somehow trumps rationality. And this is why, you know, I've become a non-believer, and also I think what Richard Dawkins says as well. Yeah. You're going to have to talk real loud, or else come down and cry.
I wanted to ask if you have ever thought about religion, that is a kind of adaptation. The religion like adaptation, human adaptation, looking at the history of human. And the second one, I didn't find in your presentation lots of arguments which may just make the impression that religion is really contradictory to evolution or to science in general.
Okay, that's a two-part question.
I'm atheist also, but I wanted to have more arguments.
Okay. So the two-part question was, you see, this is how old I am, I forget the first part. Let me take the second part. You don't find in my lecture any way that religion is contradictory to evolution. But if that were true, then how come 60% of Americans reject evolution? It's because they accept the literal belief in the story of Genesis. Now, if you believe that Genesis is literally true, you cannot accept evolution. So there's a direct opposition. If you want to look at the Catholic Church, which basically accepts evolution, they have two tenets that are directly opposed to evolution. The first is that humans have souls. And there's no evidence in any of the science that ever found that there's any kind of material part of your body that's separate from your consciousness. But more importantly, we've just recently shown in the last 2 years that the human population, the present human population in outer Africa, could never have been smaller than 2,500 people. We know this from the genetic diversity present in humans today. So that Adam and Eve could not possibly have existed, could not possibly have been the ancestors of humanity. And yet that's what it says in the Catholic Catechism, that Adam and Eve are the ancestors of every one of us. Now, we know that's wrong. Okay, so that's a direct opposition of faith and genetics. If Adam and Eve did not exist, then there's no need for Jesus, right? Because Jesus expiated the original sin that was created by Adam and Eve. That's what Catholic faith is not fundamentalist. It's fairly liberal faith, but it still makes statements that are scientifically affordable. If you're a Protestant in America or an Orthodox Jew, you're in worship because you don't buy any of this stuff at all. So, you know, there's a lot of that. I forgot the first part of your question. Do you remember what?
Religion
Oh, it's an adaptation, yes. So you say religion is an adaptation. It depends on what you mean by that. If you mean it's a genetic adaptation, then our early, sorry? Social glue, yeah, okay, so it's two. So a lot of people say, well, maybe religion's wrong, and it's been disproven by science, but it's still good. These are what I call faitheists, because they're atheists, but they have faith, and religion made good for everybody else. And I have a one-word answer for that, and that's Scandinavia, where you have that social glue. In fact, Scandinavia is a much healthier society than America. They have medical care for everybody, they take care of their old people, they take care of their sick people, they have excellent social policies, low child mortality. In every way, Denmark and Sweden are better societies than America is. And yet, America is much more religious. I think my theory is, answer, that societies become religious because there's no social glue. It helps them together. At one time, religion may have acted as a bonding mechanism. We don't know how religion originated. But now, the most religious societies are the most dysfunctional societies. And by those, I mean societies like Saudi Arabia, Sub-Saharan Africa, the United States. If you look at them sociologically and use the measures that sociologists use for how healthy a society is, they're the worst. And you can do a correlation between acceptance of science and societal health, and it looks just like the evolution correlation. So evolution, I mean, religion may have functioned as a social glue, and it may still in a place like Poland, but in a place like Poland, this is just my observation, there's a lot of poor people that are sick, that are alcoholics, and when you're like that and the government doesn't help you, you turn to religion. So there's a negative force. So religion now is, I'm not a Marxist, God forbid I be a Marxist in a country like this, but I think Marx was right when he said religion is the opium of the people, the sigh of the suppressed masses. It's what people turn to when they can't get what they need from the government and from their fellow man. So I think it may have been a social glue, but it's no longer useful in this society. And if every country turned into Sweden or Denmark, I would be much happier. Not just from a religious point of view, but because we need medical care in the United States.
Medical care and faith that we survive, but there's a sense in life.
Sorry, the faith of what?
You didn't mean that this adaptation may just enable to survive when you need a medical assistance and you don't faith, you have no faith that you will survive.
Oh, I have faith when I go to my doctor.
It's not so just medical care.
Yeah, but
So
I mean,
I think about survival when I was talking about religion as kind of adaptation.
yeah.
Looking at the history, it was, now it's not exactly the same thing, but it may be the kind of adaptation to survive.
Except that the Swedes are doing fine compared to us. I mean, look, what I'm proposing is not to get rid of religion. You know, the communists tried that in Poland and it didn't work. They suppressed it for 30 years and then it came back again. What I'm suggesting is the way to improve acceptance of evolution and everything else is to make a better society. And when you make a better society, when you give people health care, when you give them when they stop being alcoholics, when there's no corruption in their government, when there's fewer deaths in childbirth, religion will disappear naturally, I think. And it's not that, you know, I mean, we can help it along like Richard and I do, but ultimately the way to go is to work for a society in which people are more equal, that there's not these big disparities in income. Everybody gets medical care, you get taken care of when you're old. And my theory is, and my prediction is, that when that happens, then religion will disappear because there will be no more need for it. That would be my answer to that.
Okej, więc podziękujemy jeszcze raz profesorowi za wykład. Emocji